Hello and welcome to Really Cool People, podcast produced by Schweitzer Church. I'm your host, Jason Leininger. This is a place to hear stories of really cool people. And the hope is that as you and I listen, we'll be inspired, encouraged, and challenged through moments of serendipity. In a sermon entitled The Weight of Glory, C.S. Lewis said, "There are no ordinary people. You and I have never talked to a mere mortal." It's my joy over the next few moments to introduce you to somebody who may seem somewhat ordinary, especially themselves, and yet they're a really cool person. Today, we're going to meet Barth Fraker, and Barth has got a ton of stories. He's going to walk us through his childhood growing up in Marshfield, Missouri, and he's going to talk about church, the influence of music in his life, and the power and the presence of Christ in his life. He's also going to talk about things he's done and experienced as an adult, from working locally to traveling to all kinds of different places in the country, all in the work of, at the end of the day, all in the effort to help share and encourage through and with the work of Christ. So I invite you to lean in and enjoy this conversation with Barth Fraker. Today we're happy to welcome Barth Fraker in to the podcast studio. Welcome, Barth.
Thank you.
Let's start with your story.
Do we have time?
We do.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Marshfield, Missouri, 25 miles or so away from here. I grew up in a family of my parents and two brothers. I came along late in life. I like to say they didn't like the first two, so they had me. 12 and 9 years difference. I was the surprise, and come from a long line of family that was community involved, community service. My dad was in banking. My mom worked for the assessor of the county, and she stayed for 20-some years, which was pretty rare in a small community because depending who was elected, they would bring their own people in.
Sure.
So she was able to stay through 3 assessor administrations, back when they had plat books that they wrote in pencil. And but before computers. So,
yeah.
My grandfather was presiding commissioner of the county. My dad's only brother was the sheriff of the county. And so there was always a joke about the banker, the sheriff, and our family extended family has a funeral home. So, from the beginning to the end, and when you're in trouble, somebody in the family will take care of you.
You just needed a preacher in there.
There might have been a few of those even come along. Yeah. Long line of community service in the family on both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. My oldest brother is a contractor in the area, and my middle brother was county commissioner, also then went on to be state representative and worked under Governor Parson, and now is doing some training for safety for the Roast Ready Mix, which is on I-44. If you go down the road, it's the big concrete company. That's my cousins. My mom was a roast.
Okay.
So a long line of community involvement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I grew up in the Methodist church in town. It was a church that was, we kind of said the city church. Big music program, big choir, the only pipe organ around at the time. And that was really fun for me as a student of music. And as I mentioned in our hymn sing, but we would go to my grandparents' church. And that was the Country Methodist Church, where I really learned about hymn singing and harmony and spirit-filled congregations. Let's put it that way. Made a big impact on my life.
Did they not sing harmony at the city church?
They would. We would read it. We would read harmony. I think one of the differences was my family grew up singing harmony.
Okay.
And we just heard it. We learned it because we heard it so often. To this day, my ear goes more to harmony than it does the melody. And I just grew up hearing it. I can see them taking those paperback hymn books and rolling them back, and my grandfather leading the singing. And we'll just say what we learned in college about good tone quality might not have been used, but it was certainly more spirit-filled than what I learned in college. And I would give anything to hear that more frequently. And then actually my grandfather's father was a song leader in the church, Ebenezer Methodist, which is different than the Greene County Ebenezer. There's 2. It was Ebenezer 1 and Ebenezer 2. And this is the Webster County Ebenezer 2 out off of 38 East. But they sang in shape notes. So my mother learned to sing shape notes, which is, we call it by rote, do, re, mi, fa, and they learned the shape with, the tone. And I never really could do it, but I certainly loved hearing it. And they would occasionally pull that out at a Sunday afternoon singing. So, went to Marshfield schools 12 years and then came to Missouri State. I originally came to Missouri State. It was kind of a battle. Do I go there or do I go to Evangel? Because I wanted to go into church music. I knew that I wanted to go into church music, and I also wanted to teach in some capacity. And Carol Wilson, who was my high school choral director, who goes to Schweitzer now, really pushed me to Evangel because of organ background and piano and choir, and that she was a graduate. And it was pretty expensive, and we chose to go the Missouri State route. We, as in, that's what I needed to do. I had a full scholarship to play piano for the choirs at Missouri State under Dr. Guy Webb. And I, right before school summer started, I decided, I think I want to go to Mizzou. My friends are going to Mizzou. I didn't know anything about Mizzou except music contest. And I knew Missouri State people weren't supposed to like Mizzou. But I decided I was going to go to Mizzou. Literally moved to Mizzou the summer after high school, stayed about 4 weeks, moved home in July, called Dr. Webb and said, can I get my scholarship back? He said yes. And so I came to Springfield and went to Missouri State. I was going to go into a program. Bob Scott was the director of the music department, and he wanted to start a program for sacred music in a state school. It was going to be in combination with the religious studies department. And his words, you can kind of be our poster child for this to start with this program. So I started in, music major, religious studies minor, and got all my gen ed, or most of it, out of the way, except for the ones that I put off till the end. And it never came to fruition. There were a lot of walls, I would say, to that program coming, whether it was the need or the necessity or what. So it just never really happened. And I got towards, as my career would go on, I knew I didn't want to teach music in the classroom. I thought at first that that's what I wanted to do along with church music. And I don't know, 6 months in, I was like, I don't want to be in a classroom. That's not me. So I actually, through one of the Schweitzer members, Willa Johnson, was in the child and family development area. And she, along with my mentor in the music department, said there is a thing called individualized majors, where you basically write your own major, or the department will, if it's specified. And they said, you would definitely qualify for this because of where we thought you were going to be going. So I ended up getting a degree, an individualized major in music, religious studies, and youth development, because it was the closest thing to church work that you could do at a state school. And had to be written, 3 departments were involved, and you had to go before a hearing and all that stuff. And the equivalent, I guess, would be it's a major and 2 minors, I guess, really.
Sure.
I had all the music hours for a performance degree except the recital and the 1 foreign language. You had to have 12 hours of 1 foreign language, but I had everything else. So, but it ended up being a Bachelor of Science degree, and it was a long process. I was working full time at First Baptist Marshfield. An interesting story about that. When I started Missouri State, I got a call from Robert McDowell and said, we're looking for an accompanist at Schweitzer Church. Would you come accompany our youth choirs and children's choirs? And I thought, this would be great. I mean, it's a job. And I didn't do marching band at Missouri State, so I was just in the choral program, so time was okay. And I started in August. Joyce Bernard had a children's choir camp. 90 kids everywhere, just crazy. And I started Schweitzer, playing for the youth and children's choirs, and then moved into playing for the adult choir as Cheryl Mall was out on maternity leave.
What year was this?
Fall of 85.
Okay.
Fall of 85. Because I remember the old chapel.
Uh-huh.
I remember the no air conditioning and that sort of thing. And Cheryl.
I can't believe that chapel used to not have air conditioning in it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Open windows. But it didn't, if anyone would be hot, it would be me. And I don't remember that.
Huh.
I just remember how packed the choir was up in that little chancel area.
Yeah.
So Cheryl was out on maternity leave and I filled in on Sundays. And I guess I did the youth choir tours with a lot of folks that we see now that just played for one of them, their daughter's wedding this weekend, which is crazy. And then I got a call about 2 years later from First Baptist Marshfield. Well, in a small town, I was Methodist. The Baptist church calls and asked a Methodist to come be an interim director of music because they were in between people. And one of my mentors still is, in some regard, Franklin D. Lewis, high school band director, had him all through, made an impact on thousands of students in that community. Used to be the music director at First Baptist. And of course, I thought that was just the honor of a lifetime to get to follow him. There had been somebody in between his retirement and me. And so I went there as a part-time music and youth director. So it kind of fit in with what I was doing in school, but I was a full-time employee and a part-time college student because I couldn't quite do it all. And I was super excited about this first job at 20 years old.
Yeah.
And that first year, I guess they quickly put me in full-time. And I took the minimum in college to be able to continue to move forward, but my focus was there. And I laugh and look back, the impact that youth choirs had on ministry and youth involvement in that day, late 80s, was pretty impactful to our programming. And I took the youth choir to Washington, D.C. I look back now and think I cannot believe they sent their kid with me to go to D.C.
You're 21, 22?
I think I think I was 20. I think I was 20 that first year. But the way to know that they weren't 100% sure, I probably had as many adults go as I did youth that first year. Now that dwindled later on, but it was great. I fond memories of many years of youth choir tours wherever I was. We had strong, youth choirs. But anyway, so I did that and came, finished Missouri State after a full-time interim position at First Baptist Marshfield for 7 years. So
wow.
I was there 7 years and had just a really great music program, got to know a lot of folks that even today I see here or other places. And it was great, but I'd received a call from a pastor that had been pastor to the Methodist Church, Russell Jones, and he called and said, "Hey, there's a church in Springfield looking for a full-time music person, and they're really wanting to get their kids' youth music program going." And I went and did an interview for that because I had graduated, I was still living in Marshfield, and I was just ready to move on. There had been a couple of unfortunate circumstances with some leadership that had gotten in trouble, and you have to endure all those things, and it kind of causes some scars, as on church staff, and I was just pretty well done there. So great people, but a lot of people were. And so I decided to come to Springfield in 1994. So I graduated college in 92, finally. Came to Springfield in 94. And I went to another church in town and was full-time music and youth. And at this time, the church was in one of those positions where it was starting to grow almost out of control, very, very fast. And there were a lot of youth, a very large youth program, and it was the place for the South Side Springfield kids to go. And it was just a strong program, a lot of discipleship going on, and all the support in the world from the staff. We want to grow our music program. And we did that. I was there 4 years. And again, some great people, wonderful experiences all the way around, great youth choir tours. I think we took like 75 to New York. The first time I've ever been to New York. And I remember staying on 33rd Street in a Ramada Inn and turning the corner on 8th Avenue. This was before Giuliani cleaned it up, and taking the kids down because we were deciding, should we go down 8th or Broadway? How should we go down to Times Square? And after we went down 8th Avenue, we're like, we should have gone down Broadway because it was not a good place to take a bunch of students. But anyway, that was just a great memory of people there. Again, due to some unfortunate circumstances with some leadership, not related to me, but many of us become victims when those sorts of things happen. I was done. I was burnt out. I was like, it's time to do something different. I've been through 2 bad experiences where I had to go testify as a staff member with other folks that had done or allegedly done things to someone. And I was like, I think I'm done with this. So we had often had musicians come in for special concerts. And I'm a detail person. I love behind the scenes, making things happen, making sure that things run well. And I enjoy that. And so we had some musicians come through that had said, you'd really be good at road managing. We need detail people that can go in, make decisions for the moment, because we need consistency when we're on the road. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And of course, at the time, some of the names were like, well, that's really cool. That'd be great. Because they all tour together. A lot of them would get on different tours, and there's 3 or 4 artists together. And I thought that would just be really, really fun, and was offered a position to do that. And I'm kind of in a way trying to run away from the messes that were here that I was just tired of. And I decided to do it. Well, the only problem with that is there's not a lot of consistent financial stability because you're waiting on the tours. So I would go maybe on a 35-city tour with a particular artist as their road manager and do all the logistics, the hotels, the travel, and flights, and set up the details with the venue or the church you're going to, or concert hall or festival, and make sure they have everything they need, and you're carrying merch along, and you're flying with merch and merchandise, and just trying to make sure that things run smoothly, going great. But I just needed more dates, and just met some incredible people through that, and people always say, oh, you're name dropping all the time. I'm like, no, I'm really not. It's just the blessings that I've been given to be able to work with people that have a name. I could tell you the story and you wouldn't have a clue what I'm talking about. But if I put a name with it, you go, oh, I've heard of them, or, but that was a really impactful time for me, and loved it, but it just wasn't terribly stable. So I remember driving to Nashville. I'd come home for a holiday or something, and I was driving to Nashville, and I was going right into Paducah. I can still remember where I was. And every time I drive through there, I think of it. And I got a call from Cheryl Mall. And Cheryl said, we're needing to hire a full-time director of music at Schweitzer. Would you be interested? And she was on the committee as chair, and Gail Randolph and different folks were in that. And the first time I said, no, I'm not interested. I was like, I'm good. I'm good. I was probably headed to a 30-city bus tour. And I didn't think it was that a big deal right then. And I went on with what I was doing, and toured and stayed on a lot of futon couches and of other band members or the artists. I would stay in their home. They'd have a spare room. I would stay there because I didn't fully move to Nashville. Drove home a lot. Lots of trips to Marshfield from Nashville.
It's a long drive, by the way.
It's a long drive. It was 7.5 hours.
Yeah.
And I can tell you during deer season between Paducah and Nashville, you got to be careful.
Okay.
Never hit one, but I've counted many. The Lord, whatever, Cheryl was persistent and called back a few weeks later, or I don't know if it's a month or something, and said, hey, are you sure you're not interested in this? We've got this position. And at the time I was like, maybe I should talk to him. And whether, healing had taken place or I was ready to, and I came and visited with the committee, and they said, we'd like to offer you this position. And anyway, I accepted. So that would have been sometime in 99. And I've lost track of the months exactly. And so I did. I came to Schweitzer full time, and youth choirs were a big deal here. And so we decided to start growing the youth choir program. And we had junior high and high school. And just for the record, junior high is not my calling, just so you know, especially junior high girls. I didn't have the patience, but luckily I had a lot of great adults around that did. It was a challenge for me, but it was great. We had some great ministry happen. Hymn singing was great, and big choir, and we used orchestra. It was just a really good time for someone, quote, in church music.
Mm-hmm.
It was great to be at Schweitzer. And there was still this gnawing at me about how much I love the road. I've always loved travel. My parents never really traveled with me. I always joked with them and said, well, you probably did with the two older boys, but by the time I got there, we went to Branson or we went to Grove, Oklahoma to see a timeshare and get a free watch or something, we just didn't travel that much. They weren't traveled people. And we certainly weren't lake people, because my dad would say, we don't go to the lake, we go to church. That was the phrase I heard growing up. So I wanted to travel. Any opportunity, I wanted to go. So amongst all this time, I was still connected with my friends in Nashville, and we occasionally I would go. Fridays we were off at church. I would often fly out on a Thursday night, maybe go do a concert somewhere on Friday with them, and then fly back on a Saturday night. I drove home many nights from Kansas City Airport to get home in time for church on Sunday, which was crazy. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was some, and especially as your name became known in the industry, they wanted to find somebody they could trust. So I didn't do the big tours, but I did do those. So I did that for the 7 years here at Schweitzer, and then I traveled, just occasionally. And then the opportunity came to go on the road more often with an organization called Women of Faith. Mm-hmm. Women of Faith, started years ago with a group of ladies, really came out of Campus Crusade for Christ, I believe, originally. And some different, spokespeople. And they were looking for artists to be on the road. So as it first started out, I thought, this is my chance. I've been doing this church thing for a long time, the church music, I'm ready to do it. But, you got to have stability. You got to have health insurance. And a good friend of mine, one of my mentors is Rita Gurian. And Rita was a vice president at Cox Health here in Springfield. She said, there's some positions here that you could do part-time that would work with your travel schedule, that would probably fit real well. And we worked that out. And it was in, believe it or not, details, taking care of things that needed to be taken care of, making sure people had what they needed. It was in employee or patient advisory, if you will. And then a position moved over into auxiliary administration, which included student volunteers, which was right down my alley, and the Medical Explorers program. So I was able to do, I'm going to pinpoint 1 year. I traveled on the road with Women of Faith. I believe it was 39 or 42 weekends a year, that 1 year. Women of Faith or one of the artists, weekends. So I would leave out on a Thursday, and I would be gone Friday, Saturday, and I would come home on a Sunday. And I did that all those weekends, but then I'd be at the hospital Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for whatever part-time program it was that I was doing there. It's really odd today to go to the hospital and even as a patient, and your doctor and your nurse, and they're all former students that you had as medical explorer or volunteer. Wow. And I'm like, do you all know what you're doing? I hope you do. But that's kind of fun. But anyway, so yeah, I through that travel, I loved it, loved every bit of it, and would probably have kept doing that. But there came a time when Women of Faith it grew, and they started a teen conference called Revolve, and so that was even in the off season. So we were traveling a lot, and that's really where I met a lot of really cool people, musicians that you would just meet on a different level than what you hear on the radio or know of, and reading a book. And it's probably where my love for CeCe Winan started, was when we traveled on the Women of Faith tour, and you got to know her as an individual and not just what you see on the radio or hear on the radio. And amongst all that, I was super close to my parents. I always have been. I'm a mama's boy, proud of it from day one, still claim it. I would wear the shirt if there was one. And my mom started having issues with dementia, Alzheimer's. And so I was in a position where I was feeling the tug of, I need to be here. And, sometimes that responsibility falls on the oldest. Sometimes it falls on the youngest. Sometimes it falls on whoever's closest.
Right.
I was the youngest, plus I was closest, if you will, because I used home base here. And as we could see things really progressing. And so I decided I needed to be here. I was still on the road, still working at Cox, but I would turn down some of the weekend work. I'd say, I need to not go this weekend. I need to be home. And that was all fine because I'd been with him long enough that I had that option to do that. And I specifically remember one day, I was in Portland, Oregon. I'd flown to Portland on a Thursday, and I got a call on Friday morning from the lady that would come help clean my parents' house. And she said, well, things aren't really good here. And I was like, well, what's up? She told me the status of my mother, and I said, I'll be home. So I'd literally flown in that night before at midnight. I called my people and said, hey, I got to go. They didn't ask any questions. Got to the airport, walked up and thought, this is going to really be expensive. I handed the lady my ID and I said, I have to go home. I didn't use the story of, it's my family. I just said, I have to go home. I don't know if she saw it on my face or what. And she said, well, you just got here. I said, I sure did. And she said, well, looky here. We've got a first-class ticket. And I got on that plane and flew straight home. Went straight to Cox and sat with my mom, and we made the decision then to go home with hospice care, comfort care, and I stayed by her side for the last 33 days. Didn't leave her side, and that was a promise that I had made and said that I would do. And there's a lot of really cool moments that happened in there that were spiritual moments that sometime I'll share with you. But just a really important time in my journey, and so after she passed, and I got to go back, got to get back in the swing, and went back to Cox and doing my thing. And it just happened to work out that I had enough PTO time at Cox that those days, just the numbers and hours worked exactly the way it needed to. Went back on the road and traveled and did that for a good bit of time. And then Women of Faith sold, and they had, corporation type thing. They weren't going to take out people, as many people, cuts and all that. And they got to where they said, we want you to commit to every date of the trip. Well, that didn't always work when you're taking care of another parent. And I was like, I just can't do it. I just can't. As much as I want to, I just can't do it. So I had to say goodbye to that in 2000. See, Mom passed in 2011. So I think 2012, I was like, I just can't do that. And so I did, and it was hard because I loved every bit of that. Made some of the best friendships and relationships from Women of Faith travel. To this day, the stories with, the hilarity of some of those ladies that Lucy Swindoll and Marilyn Meeberg and Patsy Claremont, and you just get to know them. And I laughed more than I've ever laughed in my life. And I just loved it. And so that being said, I worked at Cox. I worked on it with a grant too from the Missouri Health Foundation that funded a student coordinator that took care of the Medical Explorers program. So the position was able to go to full time, but you're still capped with. It was a non-revenue department. The auxiliary and the volunteer department is non-revenue. Now, granted, they save a lot of money to the hospital, but it's non-rev. So you're capped out on certain positions. So I was at the highest I could go there financially, if you will. And I thought, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I mean, I would move in with you. I mean, I wouldn't. You just have to, it just wouldn't have worked. So I had received a call from an individual said, there's someone looking to run for office, possibly down the road, but we know that you know a lot of people in Springfield and your family names are respected. Would you mind to introduce them to people around at an event that was here in town? And they had an incredible resume because of military service and such. I thought, that's pretty cool that they would call me. Okay, So I did, took the individual around and introduced them and was super impressed with the resume and what was presented. And 2 weeks later, received a call from that individual and said, hey, you were good at details. Would you consider coming to work for me? And this just kind of laid in my lap. And I thought, wow, and I knew this person was going somewhere. I mean, that I would have opportunity in the future. And I made the decision in 14. So yeah, that would have been 14 when they called. And I went to St. Louis and worked for an individual who was a speaker on a level of Apple and IBM and Hilton Hotels and all the big companies. And it was a motivational speaker and had political interest in Missouri. And I was a personal assistant to that individual and the family, which was right down my alley. I mean, I loved every minute of that because I was taking care of people. I was making them look good and pushing them out front and telling them what they needed to know about this person. And okay, you're going to walk into this room and the president's on the right and and that kind of thing. And they would walk up to him and call him by name because they've been briefed, if you will. And that particular position was pretty amazing. I learned a lot of things. The individual was a Navy SEAL, and you learn a lot of really important things about etiquette, about communication, about detail work, about typos. And it causes you to keenly be aware of things that you don't, because I was so ingrained in it. Let me just say, I didn't make a mistake. I couldn't make a mistake because the bar was raised so high. The expectation is excellence. The expectation isn't just get by. Mm-hmm. And you saw that in so many ways. I am very thankful for that particular piece because it, while sometimes I can't read an article without the typo grabbing me, that I'm thankful for that. Learned about the Oxford comma, those sorts of things, And
2 cheers for the Oxford
there
comma.
There you go. That's right. But that was an important piece in the journey because they wanted me to continue as the individual decided to close down their personal company and speaking to literally thousands of people, not just in this country, but outside, to run for an office. And I was in some ways kind of crushed because I thought, okay, I didn't come to St. Louis to run a campaign office. They wanted me to come back to Springfield because all the people that I know were in Springfield. If you're running for office, it's all about connections. And they said, hey, would you go back to Springfield and open up the field office in Springfield for this individual's campaign for governor? And I thought, this is not what I wanted to do. I did not want to run a phone bank, and recruit college students to run a phone bank and stuff. And but that would eventually be where it goes. But still do things for the family on the side. And I thought, well, how do I do that? Well, I'd go to St. Louis 2 days a week, and I would stay in Springfield, So that became somewhat of a challenge. And I remember vividly doing something very trivial for the family in their backyard because my list could vary from task-oriented things to major things for their lives. And one day I was like, this is not what I signed up for, the task I was doing. To be quite honest, what it was they had a little boy and he would go out in the backyard and play every day. And they had a gumball tree. And he was typical boy down on his knees, and he would those things would cut through his skin. He goes, "Would you care to rake those up over there by the picnic table? Because when we come out for dinner," he's like, the child would, I said, "Sure, I'll do whatever," and I was raking those up, and I just remember looking up thinking, what have I done? I'm raking gumballs in St. Louis, and whatever age I was at the time, I thought, this isn't really where I think I was headed. It was a turning point for me. I remember specifically the backyard and that happening. And I decided, this is crazy. I need to do something different. And again, another disappointment, I guess you could say. It just didn't go the way you had thought it was going to go. And I decided, okay, I'm going to start looking at Springfield for something full-time, non-campaign related. My family's been around politics our whole life, but I don't like the politics of politics. I love the community service aspect, and I love whenever good people get elected to things, but that doesn't always happen. And sometimes it's hard to separate elections as a business. And like, we didn't put our time and effort into somebody we don't believe in. That's just how we've always been. So I had a call from just one of these random things that just happens. And a friend of mine here in Springfield, who actually is now my boss, which is pretty interesting. And he called and said, "Hey, we have a position opening with the Greater Springfield Board of Realtors." And I thought, well, I'm not a realtor. I don't need to know. This is association. It's detail work. It's taking care of events and taking care of us as agents, about 3,000 of them. And on the association side. So I decided it was time to do it. Come back to Springfield. Meanwhile, I'm taking care of my dad because, that's part of what I signed up for, thankfully, and honored to have done it. And I came back, and 9.5 years later, I'm still in that position. And along that journey, somehow, I ended up back at Schweitzer. So figured that one out. So I've been at Schweitzer 3 times. I was here in college. I was here when Cheryl Mall called me in Paducah, and I was here when Cheryl called me about, hey, we're needing an accompanist for the choir. And then now our roles have reversed, and we support each other through all that.
And you were sprinkled out in other moments and other times throughout those years, because you would.
Yes. Yeah, I would still come on, they would call me on Christmas Eve, would you come play for these services? And I've spent most Christmas Eves at Schweitzer, with a few exceptions. Even when I was even helping another church, I would be at the late one, or,
Right.
There for a while when I was in between positions. I played at several different churches in town, just played. I enjoyed it. No responsibility. You walk in, you play for the service, and no pressure, I should say. And my connection to Sheila, played for her at First and Calvary for a couple of years while Jim, the organist, went and got his doctorate. And we knew each other from college. She was a graduate assistant when I was a student at Missouri State, became fast friends. That was umpteen years ago. And many laughs later, and here we thought, is this really happening? Are we working together? This is just the coolest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talked about music early on, but one of the things I'm interested there is, where did the light bulb come on for music so much that you would pursue it?
My dad would tell the story that I would go to church and I would go home and I would pick out songs on the piano. My grandmother on my dad's side had an upright piano, and she dealt with depression, especially back in the day. I don't know all the stories about it all, but music was an outlet for her. And I remember the one hymn that we always would play at Grandma's, and she would teach me to play the top hand, was Standing on the Promises. And she was one of those players that had the left hand that would go, up and down. And then at some point, and my brother tells this story great. Lyndall, my brother, has the best memory of things, but said that Grandma said, I think you need to take that piano to your house because he needs to start learning. And I wasn't an athlete. You wouldn't have won. I tried. I played baseball 3 summers and tried basketball, but they didn't pass it to me for sure. And that's where I found my outlet. It was probably from my grandmother, We called her Granny.
Mm.
And then at the Methodist church in town, we had a music director, Martha Fogelsong, who, by the way, is still directing the choir. And she was a piano teacher in town, and my parents asked her to give me piano lessons. I started in third grade. She really wanted us to be able to read, and I didn't practice very often, but I did play a lot. I played the things I probably wasn't supposed to play as much, But I started in third grade, and then that's where the love of piano really came from.
Mm.
And then, of course, in school at that time, in fifth grade, you hit band. I couldn't wait for band. That was the greatest thing ever because I kind of had a head start because I could play the song flute because I knew notes, I knew scales. I'd already been playing in recitals and that kind of thing. So I was ready for band. And then D. Lewis, the man I told you has made such an influence on my life, was the band director. And I can still remember that fifth grade room where we were, song flute, and those kids that he knew had taken private lessons. He kind of gave an extra wink to and knew he was going to put us in a position. We kind of got our choice of instruments, if you will. And that I would say certainly my grandmother and even on my mother's side, I talk a lot about the harmony singing. That was all on my mother's side of the family. I don't know how much time we have, but I got to tell you, there was a man I met at Cox Hospital. This is just how full circle this is. When I told him my name, he says, "Oh, I went to high school with your dad." This is a relative of Fred Lehman, Reverend Fred Lehman, who's here at Schweitzer, He said, boy, I just got to tell you, I remember growing up, going to the Marshfield Square, and we had a curfew, and I had to get home. And he said, I remembered walking down Maple Street, and he said, I'd hear this glorious sound coming out of this little white house on Maple Street. And he said, and sure enough, it was the Roast family. They were all gathered in the front room of the living room, piano, and said they were singing 4-part harmony. The windows open. I said, yep, that was my family.
Wow.
My mom's family was super involved in community singing and Webster County Singing Convention, and it was all gospel music. That's just what I grew up with. So it really came from both sides. I think my love for harmony and vocally, that came from my mom's side, and just music in general from my dad's.
You mentioned when you were talking about your mom, caring for your mom, that there's some really special moments took place in there. I wonder if you could share one of those.
How much time do we have?
No, I mean, we can have forever, but.
There were a couple. As a child, I was, I'm sure they would have some label for it today. But I had a hard time sleeping at night. I was a scared child. I had no reason to be scared. I was probably one of the most stable, secure families. You often see children and you think, boy, they've really had a rough go or something. For some reason, I had a hard time sleeping as a child. And my kindergarten teacher, who just recently passed, she would have told you, well, that doesn't surprise me. She said you wouldn't take a nap at rest time either. So she would have me sit by her desk and help her, do something. Yeah. So that's what I always have struggled with. And I remember some of the things that God put on my heart during that time when my mom got really ill. We never dealt with belligerent. She was never went there. She was always her, but she had an illness. And the same house I grew up in, for the most part. I remember I was, maybe 6 years old. I remember she would occasionally, if I had a rough evening, she would come and rock me in that bedroom to get me to go to sleep. I mean, I was way older than I should have been for her to be rocking me, but she would do anything to get me to go to sleep because she had to go to work the next morning. And there was a particular evening that I had started staying down there. Those last few weeks, I stayed with them just for safety because we weren't sure if she would wander, and even before she got really sick there. And she came into that front room and woke me up, and I said, well, are you okay? And she just didn't really say anything. And she said, I can't sleep. I said, well, that's okay. And so lo and behold, that rocker is in that front room. And I sat down. I said, well, here, just sit on my knee. And she did. And there was a moment where I can tell it, where I'm rocking her in the same room she rocked me. And I will never, ever forget that. It happened at midnight. And I was like, okay, God, I get it. You've given me a responsibility here that is something I will never forget. And in the same room, and I've thought about that many times. People talk about home, and they talk about, the house. Was it hard for you when your parents, were gone and you had to sell the house and all? And I said, it was harder for me when my mother passed away because it was mom. And when my dad passed away a few years later, yes, it was definitely hard, and it was a different journey. It was a quick journey, but it was no longer home to me. It was a house. Mm-hmm. Now, how does the place that you know is home go to becoming a house? Simple. The parents are gone. Like what I know as home was the love of the parents. And I really think that was a blessing because I'm pretty sentimental when it comes to things, and I can attach to things, not for their value, but because of what they meant. And I remember thinking, oh, this is just going to be terrible to have to deal with this, when Dad's gone. And it became so easy because I was like, oh, home's gone. My home was the people. My home wasn't the physical house. Of course, you have a little sentimental. You drive by and you think, boy, they've messed that yard up or whatever, But it didn't have the connection that I had with them in it. And that's, in a way, I'm kind of thankful for that.
You mentioned a couple different times after working in a church for a season that there were some rough waters that came.
Right.
And yet you still ended up back in another church, and you ended up in another church. A lot of people go through moments when churches have rough waters, and it does something to their soul.
Sure.
How did you keep your heart fresh so that even at this moment, you're back in a place where you're serving back in a church?
An understanding that it's really not about me. It's a plan that's bigger than me. Jeremiah 29:11. My mom gave me a gift one time, a college graduation or something, and in the card she'd put one of those little pocket things, you put in your wallet or whatever, and I've carried that so many years, and it was, I know the plans I have for you. I thought, you know what? That doesn't say I know the plans I have. I mean, I'm making the plans that I have for me, and I think a good portion of my life I've made the plans, or I've tried to make the plans. Those didn't work. And I think there's surrender in that. There's acknowledging that we're not in control. And I was in good places, but sometimes someone could look at that and say, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not really. I was in some unfortunate situations that no one should have to go through as a bystander. Anytime that there's something bad that someone has done to someone else or allegedly done, there's always victims. And it might not just be the victim that gets the news headline. It's the people around. And to have experienced that now 3 times in my life, twice in a church and once in a publicly held office, I wasn't the perpetrator nor the main victim, but I was an innocent victim, if you will, along with other people. It's not just about me. When you recognize that and just know, you know what, this is okay. I'm going to be okay. It is unfortunate, but I look for the things that I learned. What did I learn from that situation? I mentioned the good things about the candidate, the campaign thing. There were good things there. I can't imagine some of the friendships that I made and the connections and the discipleship and spiritual development that I had at those other 2 churches. I mean, some people would say, how in the world did you end up back in a church? Even some of my Nashville friends. Really? You're back in the church? Because they know my journey.
Sure.
I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't believe. This is the greatest thing. You wouldn't believe what God's doing here. And, well, yeah, I would. That's what he does, and
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Oh, ye of little faith." I hear that often, I'm like, I know, but it's just like, I keep waiting for something bad to happen. Why would you not be paranoid? No one should have to go testify and be called by both parties twice. Who would have ever thought of that? Once called by both parties. So that tells you where I fell in the whole spectrum. You're just the bystander, if you will.
Yeah.
And 2 different times, 2 different locations, 2 different circumstances, and both of them were just yucky. And somehow God's like, hey, I'm faithful. Super meaningful song to me is He's Been Faithful. Brooklyn Tab. And those words, I don't have them in front of me, but through my moments of fear, all my doubt, all the things, there's been one constant every single time. And I know I haven't gone through a lot of what some people go through in terms of being a victim for things. I don't want that mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to your spiritual nourishment and your life and your work and where you find yourself, it affects it greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only through the grace of God that I could even be involved in a church again.
So you mentioned one song that you really like there, but I bet you've got at least a handful that are some real favorites. What would be some of your real favorite songs?
He's Been Faithful is certainly one of my favorite. I am a big CeCe Winans fan.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. I will travel to the ends of the earth. It's all about the voice with me. Everything's about the voice. I didn't even mention. I had years of vocal coaching for some students that have, went on and did great things, but it's all about the voice. It's always about the voice. I still think to this day, one of the best voices that unfortunately is no longer around is Whitney Houston. No one could, she's a beast. No one could do what Whitney Houston could do.
Yeah.
I don't care who it is. It just was the most powerful thing. So I tend to hibernate to the voice. Yeah, do you like their music? Maybe, maybe not. It's that voice.
Okay.
Anything by CeCe Winans. There's not been a song she's done that I haven't just really appreciated. I am a big Maverick City fan right now. I love many songs from them. The song Mercy really touches me, that Mav City does. And someone says, well, how does a music major listen to all of that? I had a college professor that called it gospel trash. He would say, Barth, you need to quit listening to that gospel trash, because it wasn't fine music, quite refined music. And believe me, I love refined choral music. I love the Aeolians from the Adventist congregation in college down south. Like, that is the most amazing harmony to me. I've really, really started enjoying listening to Jonathan McReynolds, who used to, do a lot of the Mav City, that kind of thing. What a voice! Like it's. I say this and it sounds snooty. I don't mean it, but when you have traveled with Sandy Patty and Point of Grace and Avalon and Greg Long and all these folks, you kind of, Natalie Grant, a lot of people like now, you kind of become desensitized to a lot of it because you hear it all the time, and it takes a lot to move me. I don't say that snooty wise at all, but like, if I'm moved, it really gets me, and that happens occasionally, and quite honestly, it happens often in our congregational singing, because there's something about it that is not. From a stage, it's not on, routine, get off the bus and go in and do this show. Of course God's going to move and we experience that, but I love it when it just happens among the people you're friends with. And, so there's so many songs I couldn't even begin to tell you. I love Alabaster Box by CeCe Winans. I love Worthy. I love, Same God. A lot of the songs today, I really, really make an impact on me. Some of the choral classics, which we're doing in a couple of weeks, is The Majesty and Glory of Your Name. Tom Fetke, it was the #1 choral piece for years and years and years. And there's something about those words and lyrics that just get me every time. I always had my vocal students do a religious piece in some sort, if it was the right voice for the right fitting. And The Lord Is My Light. Night and just some of the Oh Divine Redeemer, those sorts of pieces that just hit a note with me. And major impact for today. I don't want to be that guy that gets locked into a particular season of their life or a particular style of music. I grew up around Southern gospel. I grew up around the city church choral music. We did fine music, and that's, we did college type literature. I loved it all. And there are times when I'm on a road trip, I'll turn on the Southern Gospel channel and just sing my heart out,
Wow.
And Vestal Goodman. And I love that stuff. I do. I love it because it brings back the great memories of a great family and the togetherness of the one common thing we would have, whether I was at the city church or the country church, just the experience of that. And it was just powerful time. Powerful music. Certainly the number one thing that has sustained me. There was a thread, and that's Christ's faithfulness through all of it. All the way through.
Yeah.
And as I grew in ministry and met people that were different than my thinking, and I would hear, I know we're out of time, but I remember a conversation with somebody. I've told you this before. You really need to not sing those songs about the blood. And I was like, what? Where is this kook from? I mean, seriously, I thought, what are you talking about? I've watched my grandparents sing about the blood of Jesus and just weep at the altar, and that the impact that made on me for my own personal journey and the power of surrender and acceptance of Christ in our lives. I remember thinking, what in the world? And I was challenged one time, I don't know, probably 35, and they said, you really need to not use the word father in the Lord's Prayer because people have trouble with their earthly father. And I wouldn't have thought quick enough to say this. And I replied with, well, let's introduce them to the perfect father then.
Yeah.
Let's introduce them to the perfect father. Who knows? I mean, I've been known to say things I shouldn't say sometimes out of humor, but it goes a little deeper than that. Like, it was foreign to me to hear things like that. I diverted there, but it is impactful to me to know that was important enough that we talked about the things that were true to this world. CeCe Winans has a line in one of her songs. No matter what the world, is telling you, and I think we all get caught up in it, no matter what the world says, whether it's Hollywood, whether it's politics or the news or whatever, the cross still stands, the blood still speaks, and the grave is still empty. And I listened to that this morning. I was like, that is a truth that will stick no matter what. And you see kids going through tough times, or you see families going through tough times, and you think, you know what? I'm not worried because these three things. And the cross still stands, the blood still speaks, and the grave is still empty, no matter what society tells you. And that's the hope I want to help share.
Well, I got to ask you a question. This has been a bit of a serious and wonderfully serious conversation. But you've also, my first introduction to you was through a humorous story. And so one of the things I know is that your experiences on the road or your experiences in church have provided a number of humorous stories along the way. So you don't have to go down each of your most humorous stories, but just pick one. Tell us a story that at the moment when it happened, you may have been like, man, that was just a disaster. But at the end of the day, it's become a story that you turn to and you tell from time to time.
Oh man, there's so many, and it probably won't seem quite as funny. One of the best ones was we were in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it was Women of Faith. And, the speakers, we're all there early, and we're in the lobby, and we're riding. That particular weekend, I don't know who I was with exactly, but Marilyn Meeberg and Lucy Swindoll and Natalie Grant or Kathy Tricoli, maybe back in those days. And Mary Graham, who was one of the founders of Women of Faith, just one of the wittiest women I've ever met, and could say things and get by with it. And you just think, oh man, I love that wit. We were all in the lobby, and she walked up to me, and I was fairly new at the time, I guess. And she walked up and she said, she was in a tizzy and she was digging her purse. She says, "Could I have your room key?" And and then after she said it, I go, well, yeah. And she goes, "I need to put my stuff in there before the shuttle comes. I'll get it when we get back." But she goes, "That didn't sound too good, did it?" Hey people, I just asked this guy for his room key. And then Marilyn goes, "Well, I want his room key." And then Lucy Swindoll comes over and nudges up. She goes, "Honey, can I have your room key?" And I will never forget. So I have a picture in my phone of each one of them holding my room key up. Unfortunately, they've all three passed on now, but I reflect on those times. That was just one of, there's so many. I was always getting in trouble for saying a joke on the radio among all the volunteers, something I'd learned at a music conference or, just funny stuff. And somebody would think that it wasn't proper or whatever. And I was like, oh, lighten up, and then just fun stuff. I don't know. I really love to laugh. Laugh. Even, my parents kept their humor up until the end, and our family could laugh like no other. And I loved that part of it. To this day, I love to laugh, and it has gotten me in trouble a few times. Definitely has got me in trouble. Yeah.
Well, there's one question that we do close with just about every time on this podcast, and that's what's a bit of wisdom that you've learned or picked up along the way that you find yourself sharing with other people?
Sure. Relationships matter. Relationships matter. In my own life, I think that's probably led to some of my careers, careers, plural, my journeys. Look for the humor. Look for ways to laugh. We're not here that long. We're just not here that long. And I think probably the most poignant for me is don't fall into the things of the world. And it's a struggle. I work in a very secular industry along with the church, aside the church, and it's a journey sometimes to not fall into the things of the world, remembering the cross still stands.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things can just fall by the wayside and not be important. They are.
Yeah.
They are.
Thank you, Barth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I gave in into doing this after 2 years.
Yeah, there you go. It's been fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, a big thank you to Barth for sharing his story. In listening today, I hope that you were inspired, encouraged, and challenged so that you begin to behold the really cool people who are around you each and every day. The Really Cool People podcast is produced by Schweitzer Church, Springfield, Missouri. Taylor Likes is our executive producer and editor, and I'm your host, Jason Leininger. You can help us by liking, reviewing, and sharing this podcast. Until next time, stay cool.